Welcome to the Greater Culture Podcast, where we have conversations about how to elevate the quality of life through movement, nutrition, recovery, and mindset practices.
And welcome back to another episode of the Greater Culture Podcast. Your host, Brad Marshall here. Today, really excited to be joined by Kyle Habdo, a coach, a physical therapist who gets a chance to work with a variety of athletes. And I'm really excited to dive into his story and see what we can learn from him and what he's come to know and understand over the years. So, Kyle, thanks so much for spending some time with me on the podcast today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I was excited to do this, excited that you asked me. So I'm glad to be here.
So one of the things we love to do is to get to know our guests and a little bit about their story. So coach and physical therapist working at Training Think Tank. So tell us a little bit about how you ended up at that place and working with athletes down there.
Yeah, I always wanted to work with athletes in some capacity. I knew that sometime around like the end of high school into like my early college career. So I knew that like the trajectory was to get there. I just didn't know what the route was that I was going to take. And how I ended up at Training Think Tank was basically just Max put up a mentorship post. I think it was at the start of COVID or during COVID. And it was basically like, hey, come do this, come learn from me, but potentially it might lead to a job opportunity. And at that time, I was in my last college degree. So I was in my physical therapy degree. And because of COVID, all of my classes went online. So it basically gave me more time. So signed up and I was like, I'm just going to shoot my shot and see what happens. And the mentorship ended up really being like a 6-month long interview for myself. I don't know how it was for other people because it was really individualized. And just in that time, Max and I chatted a lot about like what I thought my role would be, what my job might be. And eventually just when it came down, I met with all the other coaches, had some like basically in-person interviews and got hired. So I ended up finishing my degree in Alpharetta while starting to work for Training Think Tank. So basically I jumped into the job that I wanted to do before I even finished college, and it's been awesome.
So talk to us a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like down there, because when you think of coach and then somebody who also works on the physio side, like those can be overlapping, but at times different. So talk to us about what your day-to-day looks like down there.
Yeah, my like, I don't know, philosophy or ethos or whatnot is rehab is training and training is rehab. So it's just a continuum for me. Like the people that I work with are on the physio side, kind of like on this like left side of the spectrum. And then the people that I work with like training or competitor wise are on the right side of the spectrum. And all I'm trying to do is take the people from the left side to the right side. And we're just trying to figure out how we can do that. Sometimes it's trying to give people more movement. Sometimes it's trying to make people stronger. Sometimes it's trying to get them to be a little bit more enduring. Sometimes it's just trying to like get them to regulate their nervous system a little bit better. So there's a lot of different ways that I do that. But at the crux of it, the training is physio or rehab or supportive work, and the supportive work is training. It's just like a spectrum of things. So balancing it gets a little weird because they are like two different branches of my job. I also do like some of the educational stuff. So like I kind of have like 3 different hats that I work, or I have 3 different branches that I travel. But the training and physio one kind of go hand in hand, but also overlap at the same time in terms of like, well, I still have 20 clients that I have to, that I work with individually as like athletes. And then I have a whole host of people who see me regularly and then come kind of in and out over like just a period of time for physio things. So some of that is remote work, some of that's in person. I've gotten better about handling my schedule because I was not good when I first started. I was like, yep, I'm just going to do everything that comes my way and I'll just figure it out. And I learned that I just can't do that. It's not sustainable for myself. So I've been better about trying to block and chunk my schedule so I actually can be like, I can be the best version of myself for these people and be of service to them. Because if I'm drained and I can't help them, then like, what's the point of what am I doing here?
Mm-hmm. One of the things I love is the idea of the philosophy that rehab is movement, movement is rehab, and that there's a lot of overlap there. How did you come to understand that philosophy or arrive at that point?
Man, it's like I probably started learning from Kelly Starrett back in the day, and I saw that what he was doing with like the what was it, movement WOD? Was that what his first thing was?
I think mobility WOD.
Or mobility WOD, right? Yeah, mobility WOD. So I saw what he was doing with people, and just being able to take people who were in pain or like suffering from like some like movement dysfunction or whatever you want to call it, and then kind of help them get back to training. And I was like, man, this is pretty cool. And like, this is kind of like the vibe that I'm looking for. And from there, like he was just kind of like the gateway to other people. And along the way, I found other people that I kind of started to align myself with who were in that same space. And I'm sure one of them said it along the way, but it was just painfully obvious to me that it was just like rehab was low level training. And all we were trying to do is take people from this low level training place and actually bring them back to whatever their goal was. That could be competitive CrossFit. That could be literally picking up their kids and going playing on the weekend. Maybe they're a weekend warrior trying to do soccer or football or whatever on the weekend. It was just trying to make sure that I had like a vision of the end goal, and like I could kind of see like what were the steps along the way, and then obviously be adaptable and flexible if it needed.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any experiences or moments along the way that kind of reinforced that? Because I think for a lot of folks, when they maybe experience injury, pain, it's the immediate response is shut it down. Don't do anything, avoid any movement. Yeah. And we have that in our heads. And I see it a lot as a coach myself of, oh, something's tweaked, something's not good. I'm just going to avoid the gym because that's where I've noticed it. So I'm curious if you had any experiences that kind of reinforce that, hey, continuing to move is really helpful, or maybe just in some of the clients you've seen.
Yeah, I've worked with a fair amount of people now, and like some of the people that I've worked with have like reinforced that idea. And some of them I've looked back and wish I would have done things differently because of the lens now that I have. The first person that I worked with from Training Think Tank or as a physio, like got my license, and like they were literally the first person I worked with. They were climbing a rope, fell, and broke their leg. And it was like, it was this whole process of getting them back to just being a human being and walking, and like just being able to get up and down stairs, squat to a box, get off a box or a chair or whatever, walk around the gym or walk around their life and like just be okay. And it wasn't even really about like being competitive again. It was like, okay, like your quality of life has severely diminished because now like you're so reliant on other people. Walking is challenging and all these things. And then at some point, like the focus of what we were doing started to deviate, and it started to look more like performance training and not just like normal rehab. And the process wasn't that long. It was probably like a 3-month-ish process, but that really just like really reinforced seeing like the idea that low level training and low level rehab is the bridges that we need to build in order to get back to high performance. And yeah, it was just that was a good one, and it was my first person I ever worked with, and I was nervous as hell.
What an experience to walk in and have a broken leg from something in the gym, something, as owners and coaches you hope to never see, but sometimes it might happen. But
for sure,
walking them through that process of back to baseline functionality and then, okay, we can start advancing from there is important. How do you communicate or educate people on that? Because if they're coming to you and saying, ooh, like tweak my back or something's not feeling great today, how do you encourage them that it's okay to keep moving and like what the right pain threshold might be, or allow them to feel confident that it's okay to keep coming to the gym?
Yeah. The pain threshold thing is weird because pain is just such an individualized experience that like the way that you interpret and feel pain is probably very different than I do it. So I'll give people a scale, but the scale is like, it's just slated to that person. Like I can't experience what they're feeling. So, in that realm, it's challenging, but I try to give just like general guidelines, like, hey, like 3 out of 10 or less is totally fine to work through. If it doesn't ramp up during the session, awesome. Those movements are good. If it doesn't last into the next day, like it gets a little bothersome in the session, but doesn't last after or doesn't last into the next day, that's also fine. Because if we tell people to avoid pain or avoid discomfort, then we never get back to the positions that were bothering us in the first place. Like you can think about like the classic person who like hurts their lower back or, pulls too many deadlifts and they're sore, and then they don't want to bend over to tie their shoes. And then they start to like reinforce not bending over to tie their shoes. So they sit down and they kind of like wiggle themselves into a position where they can grab their shoes and tie them. It's like we don't, probably a little bit is that's okay in the beginning stages, but we want to make sure that we're giving back movement patterns that can build on those patterns or build on those positions so we can get them back to doing the things that they need to do, whether that's real life things or getting back to like pulling heavy deadlifts. So the conversation is it's one that you kind of have to revisit because you kind of have to reinforce it over and over again to people, because if you just tell them one time, it goes in the ear and not the other. So I have to make sure that I say it, and I say it enough times in different ways that it sticks with someone, because if they don't believe it and they're still fearful of whatever the position is that's bothering them, then we're kind of running into a roadblock where they're, and not consciously, but they're hindering their progress a little bit. So it's like, how do we make a bridge that can help them know that a little bit of discomfort's okay. We don't have to shy away from pain. We're not going to like force them into a position that's going to hurt them or bother them or like make this prolonged. But we have to start to work back and like figure out how do we give them back the motion that they're missing.
Mm. And as a coach, I find that's one of the more challenging things is if somebody comes to us and has tweaked something or is injured, they want to avoid that position or the body's kind of going into a defense mode. So you're like, okay, we want to push just a little bit to let the body know it's okay to get back to that position, but not too much that all of a sudden we're really making the pain worse. So do you have like some kind of a hierarchy or a process or method you like to walk through with people with that? Like they come to you and say, hey, tweak my back doing deadlifts.
Yeah.
Is it like, okay, we're going to go super light, but just test out the movement? Are we going to like talk us through how you think about working with somebody in that situation?
Like the deadlift example. Yeah, like the deadlift example. So let's say they hurt their back during deadlifts. They can't touch the floor anymore. They can't bend over. So the first thing is I said, just watch them move. So if they show up to a session and they're already very guarded and fearful and like they're very stiff and robotic and like you can see that person in your mind. If you see that, it's like, okay, I'm not about to like throw weight at them or throw a barbell under them. What I'm going to try to do is restore movement first in some capacity. Now that might look like pelvic tilts, which are just laying on the ground and we're just rolling our pelvis back and forth because that's starting to give us motion, like flexion and extension through the hips and maybe a little bit of the spine. To start to establish the ability to actually bend over again, because if we put them in standing and they have to fight against gravity in order to like stabilize their spine and organize themselves backwards in space, it's probably just going to like reinforce some of that guarding mechanisms that are occurring already. So it's like, okay, what can we do that's very similar to a hinge or a deadlift or bending over and touching your toes? And then how do we build progressively from there? So it could just be super, super simple where we start on the ground, they're just doing pelvic tilts. Maybe they're doing some sideline knee fallouts. Maybe we're getting them to do some scissor slides so we can start to get their pelvis to move in the frontal plane or the sagittal, frontal plane. And then from there, maybe we just put them on a bike and we just get them to move their body or walk, something that's a little bit more reciprocal, that gets their heart rate up and breathing up so they feel like they're doing something. Because if we can give them the ability to feel like progress is being made, even if it's not the progress towards the actual goal in the first session or the first couple of sessions, and we can just get them to feel better and walk out, that's going to be a win for us, or for myself, I should say.
Yeah, I think that's huge as a coach of having some tools in your back pocket to say, hey, I still want you to come experience the class. You're probably going to do something completely different than what's written on the board, but we know how important movement is, being part of a community, staying engaged so that they can keep working towards, hey, I'm making a little bit of progress. It's feeling a little bit better. I'm not going to be going to the gym and throwing this high intensity there, but it allows me to just keep moving because we know how important that is for them.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, as someone who works as both physio and then coach, talk to us a little bit about that balance of great movement, efficiency, and quality, but also knowing that the athletes you work with are moving at a high intensity for speed, for load. How do you make sense and balance those two things as a coach and as a PT?
Yeah, man, that's a hard line for me. I struggle. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I struggle with that one. That one's really tough for me. Not that I think we have to have perfect movement by any means, because I don't want to go I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole. But movement itself is probably different every single time we do it in some capacity, and that's just from like a movement variability or movement coordination standpoint. The way that we coordinate each rep is probably slightly different. So, is it going to be perfect every single time? No, but my thought is that if we're going to race for performance, we need movement efficiency or movement economy, as Brandon talks about it, which I'm sure you've heard. And if we can get their movement quality or economy or efficiency better, then their performance probably is going to increase. Now, this kind of highly depends on the person that you're working with, because if let's just say they've been in the sport for 10 years, they've learned one way to do a movement. It's going to take them a lot of time to unlearn that movement. Their movement speed is probably going to drop, and their ability to be strong in those positions is probably going to decrease. and then you're going to have to spend time rebuilding those patterns. And it's going to be a question of what is the worth or like the cost benefit ratio. Like, is the time worth it to them to do that, or are there other low hanging fruit that you can kind of make progress on? So it's tough for me because I want people to move well, because I think if they move well, they can move faster and they can actually hit weights and things better. But at the same time, it is a sport and it's performance, right? So if I spend too much time trying to change their movement patterns and try to make them more efficient, or into the archetype of being perfect that I attribute movement to, I might be actually hindering their progress. So it's a balance. It's hard for me. I have to really like remind myself to be okay with less than ideal movement. Again, whatever that actually means to that person. But yeah, it's hard. That's a hard one for me.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I know even as a coach, when you're watching people, you're trying to find the right balance of, okay, mechanics, consistency, intensity. So you're like, I think they're moving well enough. They're staying safe. Now let's start to ramp it up, add load, add speed. But then there comes a point in time where it starts to break down when you get tired and fatigued. And you're like, do I pull them back? Do I take weight off the bar? Do I adjust the movement? Or do I let them go? Because like, I think they're going to be okay. And you're kind of finding that threshold for them.
Yeah.
So I can imagine how challenging that is for you. And especially if you get to watch your athletes on site, if you're like, oh, that movement quality is not where I want it to be, but they're in the middle of a Metcon. Like, I'm going to let them go and talk about it after. Is that kind of how it works for you?
Yeah, you kind of like have to pick and choose your battles. Like, they could have great movement quality when they're fresh, and then when they're fatigued, their movement quality just goes out the window. And it's like, it's hard because like in that particular case, it's like an endurance problem, right? They just can't sustain it, or they can't sustain it when they're fatigued. And it's, well, what are the training progressions that you can give someone in order to start to change that quality? And like, it's the way that I'm looking at it is more from a competitor, individualized, like athlete. In a group class setting, it's a little bit different, because it really comes down to like, why is that person there in that class setting? Like, are they there to race and have fun with their friends? Are they actually there to change their health profile, make like new changes to their body, like make healthy behavioral changes, things of that nature? Because if that's the case, then that makes the deviation for me really, really easy. It's like, okay, well, we're here to make sure that you move well. Maybe you're making some behavioral changes. Maybe we're trying to like change your diet, things of that nature. So we're going to strip weight back, and we're going to make sure that like your movement quality is better than not. But if they're there for performance and racing, like, I'm just going to let them go and let them have fun, because like that's why they came there for. So it's just making sure that I align the things that I'm seeing with the goals from the actual person, and making sure that those match. And then I kind of like give them a little bit of what the things that I want, and make sure that they get the things that they actually need.
I really like that idea of understanding their goals and their intentions, what they want to get out of the experience. And that helps as a coach guide how much you might be influencing, coaching, or providing some feedback in the moment. Like you said, if it's somebody who's competing, getting ready for the open or qualifier, let's test it and see how they're doing. And others are like, I just want to feel good and move the rest of my day. Cool. Then I'm going to make sure I adjust accordingly for you.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah.
And when you're thinking about working with these athletes, are most of your clients more on the competitive performance side versus like the lifestyle, just want to move, enjoy lifting, enjoy CrossFit? Like, what's the balance look like for some of the clients you work with?
They're all performance-based clients, I think, at this point. I did have some that were lifestyle when I first came over to Training Think Tank. They just kind of like followed me over. But at this point, they've just kind of fallen off, or life changes, and they've moved on to different things, which is totally fine. But I think my clientele right now is performance-based. I have some that are intermediate athletes where they're still trying to acquire skills. They're trying to still get stronger. They're trying to like do their first RX competition, things of that nature. And then I have people who are vying for spots for the games. So I have like a very like wide range of people that I work with, but they're all performance-based in some capacity.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'd be curious of as well, I know you're big on the mobility side with a lot of the drills, warm-ups, cool downs, things like that you provide for affiliate programming, that you provide for your individual athletes. Talk to about how you think about mobility, because it's like you said, Kelly Starrett, and it's been thrown around a lot. People constantly say, I need to add more of it into my day. I need to feel like I'm moving better. How do you think about mobility and the ability to get into certain positions, and how we can help athletes do that? Because most of the athletes coming in our doors, I feel like, lack some of that mobility and they're trying to get better at it. Like, I need better ankle mobility. I need better shoulder extension and whatnot. And so how do you think about mobility as you're working with athletes?
Um, so I know like the Kelly Starrett style of mobility is still popular. And I think between him, Gowad, and I don't know, throw whatever else up there, whatever.
Pliability and those in there, yeah.
Like it's always like these like banded distractions and like long held poses and things of that nature. Now, maybe sometimes that's fine but in my like model and the way that I think about it, I've really have never seen those things actually give people changes. I see people do it all the time, but I've never seen it actually make a difference in terms of their movement quality or their movement positions or their mobility, ability to get into active positions. So to me, it's like it's a waste of their time. Though this is kind of where I have to like be mindful though. Like if that's what they like to do, like then do that thing, man. It's like it might not be the thing that's helping you, but it's a thing. And if that makes you feel better and that allows you to like even potentially get into a better position because it gives you some sensory change, awesome. But it's not the thing that I reach for. So like when I like work with people who need to acquire like mobility or better positions or get into like better positions for like whatever movement we're working on, whether handstand push-ups, snatching, overhead squats, squatting, deadlifting, whatever it is, I think about it from a what is missing standpoint and what can I give them. So it becomes a question of can the joint itself get into the position that they need to? If it can't, why can't it? Like, is it um, is it like just positional, like they actually can't like move their body? Like, so for a squat, like you can, I'm sure you see this in like your classes, like if you see people go down and they're very center of mass forward, right, it's very knee dominant over the toes and they can't actually sit backwards and maybe they turn it into a hinge. Well, they might, like they perceive it as maybe ankle mobility, but maybe they just don't know how to manage their mass in space, so they're always forward no matter what they do. And for that person, you could do all the ankle drills all day long and it may never matter because they don't know how to shift themselves backwards in space. Now, that's just a particular example, but for that person, like what I'm working on is, well, how do I give them the ability to feel that? Because if I can have them feel that and I can have them feel that over time, then they can actually make changes into their positions. So that's a particular example, and there's lots of more that are like that. Sometimes I'll use some breathing drills to kind of give people the ability to bring their nervous system level down and actually get into better positions, especially for upper body mobility when people are lacking, like external rotation or shoulder flexion or things of that nature. But I have to go back and then give them loaded positions. It has to change, because if I just do a breathing drill or a little unloaded stretch drill, maybe we can make a quick change in the moment, but we then have to load it in some capacity in order to have a long lasting changes, because your body will just go back to what it normally like functions as. So that's my way I think about it. It's like, what's missing? Is it like a movement restriction or the inability to get into a position? Are they weak? Are they strong? Are they stiff? Are they super flexible? Do they need a little bit more endurance in the position? Like they can get into the position, but the position fails after 10 seconds, like a handstand. Like, can they sustain that position? So it's really a question of individuality and how can I align the things with that person as best I can.
So one of the things you mentioned was this idea of go-wad, pliability, like more like yoga-like poses of hanging out. Some people will do that before, some people will do that after.
Yeah.
It sounds like you'd recommend finding the specific limitations and then either working the position, working some of the stability, working some of the strength there, as opposed to more of a general, just kind of body flow.
Yeah, I think those general body flows are fine. Again, like if those were the things that people like do those things. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Sometimes I'll make up my own and kind of just like do that at the end of the night just to like have something to move my body around. I think they're fine. But what I like see from people who do that is they don't really ever make changes. Like maybe they're, because like I know like GoWa does like a mobility score, you have to like do a pre and retest, and maybe they make a change for the specific position, but I don't know if the actual change carries over into like the movements and things that they want to get better at. So my thought is like, can the joint achieve a position that we need for whatever movement that we're trying to do? And if it can't, well then how can I start to give them drills that start to get the joint to move in the position it needs to, and then have the muscles be able to lengthen and contract for lengthen and shorten, I guess, around that position.
Mhm. It leads me to think about warm ups and how you think about warming up or getting your athletes ready. I know the same thing as a coach. You get people coming to you who might be the first thing they're doing that day in the morning classes. It could be a day of sitting at a chair in the office, and now they're coming to you. You've got a workout program that you know you want to get them ready and prepared for, be able to get into those positions, demonstrate stability and strength in those positions. How do you think about warming people up and getting them ready for what's going to come? Because I think there's always that delicate balance of got to move through some ranges of motion. We want to get the heart rate elevated a little bit. Um, sometimes we like to hang out in some positions and do some of that mobility work before we get into it. But how do you think about it, or how do you program for your athletes to get them to focus on that in terms of how important it is?
Yeah, I can go back and forth on the warm up and how to organize it for my athletes. I think the biggest thing that I see from people, really, honestly, is not getting warm. Like, and I know that sounds silly, but I'll watch people come into the gym and I watch them grab like the green band and they're doing like the banded lat distraction. They're hanging out and chatting with their friends, which is fine. Like, you all need that. We need the community aspect of coming to the gym, even if it is like in the individual style. Like, they still come there and they still have their friends and they're still chatting. But I watch a lot of people just not actually get warm, like not get their heart rate up, not be sweating. And I think even if you could start to do that, it's probably going to it's probably going to make you feel a little bit better. Like, you can actually get into positions without needing to like spend a bunch of time doing like some of those typical things that people do. So I think that's probably my biggest thing. And then after that, it just kind of depends on the individual. Like, if they're missing, let's just say like they're going to do a squatting session and they're actually missing the ability to like sit down in a deep squat. Well, then we're going to figure out what we need to do. So it's going to be like, I probably would give like, spend 5 to 10 minutes on a bike or echo bike or whatever, kind of warm your heart, get your heart rate up, and then insert 3 to 5 drills that I think they need in order to like be able to sit deep in that squat. And then from there, go straight into their strength training. Now, if I'm working with someone who has great mobility, I'm not spending any time doing that stuff. I don't think, like, if for myself, like, I can get into the positions I need to get into for the things I want to do. So I don't need to spend time doing mobility. I might do some just some like preloading if I'm going to do something heavy, just to kind of like make my nervous system ramp up. But other than that, like, I'm just going to get my heart rate up, going to do maybe a couple of drills to like get my nervous system ready to go. And then I'm going to start lifting. So it kind of just depends on the person, what they need and like what they need individually. And then making sure that I give them like reasons why we're doing those things.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear that perspective because I think people go on either side. Some people treat the first round as the warm up and they just jump right into it. And other people are like, I need 20 minutes of like focused, dedicated, warming up and attention to get into it. And finding the sweet spot and the balance as a coach, especially in a group class, can be a little bit challenging, especially when you feel like you've got things you want to get through and you got general warm up, you got specific warm up, you've got all this instruction, but getting people's heart rates up. And then something else you said there, this idea of getting the nervous system ready for what it's about to engage in. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that, of getting the nervous system ready for, whether it's a strength training, whether it's maybe some intensity with some cardio or things like that? What do you mean by getting the nervous system ready?
I think the easiest way to think about it is like doing like a max lift. I think this is like the best way to think about it, right? So if you come into the gym, your max lift is on the board. Let's just say it's a 1 RM snatch, and you walk in, you've been at work all day, and you just came into the gym. You do like maybe a little general warm up, and you got to get your heart rate and breathing elevated, and then you just start going into your snatching. You're probably pretty flat. You've probably been sitting at a desk all day. You've probably been pretty stressed. If you don't spend time trying to ramp up your nervous system, like trying to get yourself, I guess more focused is also a way to think about it for the session. Your attention to the movement, the coordination of the movement, your ability to create force is probably going to be dampened. So it's not that hard to like try to trick your nervous system. I don't know how to say trick, but like ramp your nervous system up in order to do those things. Like, it could be super easy, like a couple depth drops to vertical jumps, couple like echo bike sprints, like max effort at 10 seconds, maybe a couple med ball throws. There's lots of ways to kind of do that, to start to get your body to think about producing power or producing force at like an aggressive state, so that when you go to the barbell, you can bring some intensity to the barbell and not just be I don't know, flat, I guess is a way to think about it.
Mhm. Yeah, it almost makes me think of the idea of like a funnel. Like when I'm walking into the gym, I'm talking to my friends, I'm just kind of getting acclimated to like, all right, I'm doing the gym thing. And then slowly but surely, mentally and physically, like I'm getting more and more focused
Yeah,
with the way I get my body warmed up, with the way I get my mind ready for what's coming at me and being ready to tackle whatever the workout is for that day.
for sure.
So the warm up can be really, really important. Get the heart rate up, get us feeling like we're in a position to do well. Let's talk about after the workout, because one of the things I've seen as a coach is sometimes we don't have enough time for it at the end, or somebody's run into the next thing on their day, on their calendar. Talk to us about how you think about whether you want to call it the cool down, the post workout work. How do you think about that or program that for your athletes? Is that something important that like we just did this strength session, we just did this metcon, now we got to get the body back down to whether it's baseline or recovering? How do you think about sort of the cool down or the post workout time?
Yeah, I think it's like a down regulation effect, right? We're trying to bring us back to baseline, like you said, trying to take us out of this sympathetic state, this high intensity, high effort, like maybe aggression state, and we're trying to bring us back down so that we can like almost end the chapter of our session and we can move on to the next thing, whatever that is. I think there's a lot of ways to do it, and I think people think it's more complicated than it needs to be. I think the easiest way, literally, is to lay on the ground, put your feet up, and do some box breathing. Box breathing is when you control your breath, inhale, pause, exhale, pause, and just kind of make a rhythm out of it and spend 4 or 6 minutes, put something over your eyes, lay on the floor, and then do box breathing for 4 to 6 minutes. And it's an easy way for your body to start to down regulate from the intensity and then be able to like move on to the next thing without going into it feeling like all this like tension and like this like overstimulated like feeling.
Yeah, and that's what I've noticed too is like you finish a metcon and maybe you like to lay on the floor, maybe you try and go for a walk. Some people like to hop on a machine and just kind of pedal it out. But it's like, all right, we clean up, we give each other a fist bump, and sometimes it's like you're running out the door and then you almost feel tight or constricted or like more sore because we didn't
Yeah.
take the time to. All right, we clean up our equipment. Let's all just kind of chill here. So we've really appreciated in the affiliate having some of those cash outs, which are
Yeah.
very like focused on mobility work or just like some slow breathing type stuff. It's kind of like forcing athletes like take a moment, breathe, and let's bring that heart rate and nervous system back down to baseline before we send you off for the day. So I know those are really helpful too.
Yeah, I think the affiliate does a good job of trying to like give a well-rounded approach so people can experience different warm-ups, be able to like ramp up to the intensity that's necessary for the session, and then also give examples of like, well, how do you cool down? And I don't, and this is my opinion, I don't know how Mike and James and Ryan think about this, but like my opinion would be like, well, they give you variety, so you see different ways of cooling down, and then you pick and choose the ones that you want to do. You don't necessarily have to do the one that's on the day. Like if you find breathing is the thing that you like and that helps you like move on, awesome. If you find foam rolling makes you kind of like turn this mental switch off, it kind of lets you bring down your breathing, bring down your heart rate, we kind of return to baseline, sweet. If it's biking on the erg and talking with your friends and that's the thing, awesome. But I think um, what like in my eyes, like what I like to do is give people autonomy because I want people to be able to think and feel and act for themselves. I want to give them the information and teach them and educate them. But then at some point I want them to be like, hey, it's cool down time. Go do the thing that you like to do so that you can move on and take care of whatever's next for yourself.
Yeah, that speaks to educating the athletes and then like allowing them to have some of that autonomy. Because that's probably one of my favorite moments as a coach is when they come up to you and it's either modifying movement, modifying the weight, and they say like, "Hey, coach, here's what I'm thinking for today," and you go, "That's perfect. Like, I'm so glad you figured this out and you're identifying it for yourself. Like, you're getting just a higher level of IQ with your own movement, fitness, and things like." That. And I think it sounds like you really appreciate the same thing of you give these athletes all these things and sooner or later they're like, oh, I'm starting to learn it for myself. I can do this without needing Kyle to tell me exactly what to do and how to do it.
Agreed. I look forward to when people ask questions and they want to learn why, or they challenge me to go learn the why so that I can educate them better, or I can educate the next athlete in the line of things, because I want them to have autonomy. I don't want them to have to rely on me. Like I want to coach them and I want to help them see their goals through, and I want to help them navigate their problems. And, if it is a person who's in pain or experiencing injury, like help guide them. But I want them to have ownership in the process, and I want them to have their own autonomy so that they can start to know when things are okay to switch, or know when it's okay to attack things, or know when it's like not a day to do something. It's like, okay, well, I got to pull back today, and or have tools that they can start to be like, okay, well, I know I can't do this today, so I'm going to input this exercise because I know that this is in line with what we've been doing, and make the call themselves instead of always reaching out to me and being like, hey, what do I need to do? I don't necessarily want it to be hand holding. I want to just help people learn and help them become better versions of themselves in some capacity.
Yeah, it sounds like those are some of your favorite things about being a coach, which is one of the questions I was curious of, is in your role and the work you've done down there at Training Think Tank. If you could share with us, what are some of your favorite moments or the favorite things about your job that you get a chance to do in working with these athletes, working with the team down there and educating? And when you think about the things that get you most excited to get out of bed in the morning, what are some of those things for you?
Yeah. I want to see people realize their dreams. I think that's I think that's the main thing that kind of anchors me to this whole thing that I'm doing. And that just changes based on the person. Some people want to go to the CrossFit games, and I want to help that person do the thing. I selfishly want to take someone to the CrossFit games, and I want them to do really well. But I also if that's their goal, I want to get them as close or to the thing as I can. And I just want to see them achieve their dream or their goal. And if it's something less, like someone's in pain and all they're trying to do is get back to feeling good again, I also want to see that through. So I think that's one of the things that really anchors me to why I do this thing or why I enjoy what I'm doing. And then the education side is something that's always fueled me. I have 4 degrees. I went to school for way too long. And in that time of getting all these degrees, I helped TA anatomy classes and things like that. So I've always had this passion to help people understand the things that they don't know, or have them challenge me and then me go learn more about it, because I want to be able to help people basically and be of service to people. So if I can do that in some capacity, that's going to pump me up.
Yeah, it sounds like the ability to impact people's lives in a positive way, whether it's through education, whether it's through movement, or attaining a physical or dream that they have, are the really big motivators for you that keep you showing up and keep you working with all these folks.
Yeah. I think it's just, that's what pumps me up. I get excited for people. I maybe give them too much of my energy because I want them to do the thing, whatever that thing is. But it's what pumps, it's what fuels me. So what's getting me out of bed every day. I love what I do, and I would not trade this for the world.
Yeah. You get a chance to work with a lot of coaches down there, and everyone's working with a variety of athletes. Talk to us about what that experience is like, of surrounding yourself with others who are also passionate, also care about helping other people, but maybe have a different approach, because you have your approach and the way you think about working with athletes. They might have a different approach. How has that helped or benefited you to surround yourself with other people who are also on the path to trying to help others?
It's funny. I thought for a while I wanted to own my own gym, and do my thing by myself. And that's when I was living back in Buffalo, New York. And as soon as I started to make the switch, that I was like, okay, I'm getting this job opportunity with Training Think Tank. This is going to happen, I think. And I got down here and I started working with them closely. It was oh, I don't want to do this by myself. There's nothing inside of me that does not excite me at all. The ability to look at all of my coworkers or all of the coaches that are there, learn from them, ask them questions, see how they interact with their athletes, see how they program for their athletes, has been such a tremendous, it's such a big thing that you don't know that you need until it's in the moment, until you know that, until it's happening. So, I've been fortunate to watch Adam work with Alexis, and how Max and Travis's relationship has evolved, and spending time with Perrin and watching Perrin coach all these athletes who are basically knocking on the door or going to the games now. So I've had so many of these people who have influenced the way that I'm thinking. It's been changing. It's been life changing. And am very appreciative of all of the coaches and their different philosophies, because like you said, they all come from different backgrounds. So it's like, I can lean on Ryan if I need running help. I can reach out to Becky if I need nutrition or rowing or some sort of like erg progression. I can reach out to Kyle Ruth and Adam if I need or even Mike McGoldrick for like higher level strength training or like athlete progression. So it's just like all these coaches have their, I don't want to say specialty because they're all good at all the things, but they definitely like niche a little bit into the things that they love, and having them on our team is awesome.
Yeah, it makes sense. The name for the brand and the company of creating that think tank like experience where when you can collaborate with people, you can learn so much faster and advance at a quicker rate than trying to do it alone, like you said, and trying to figure out and solve all the problems individually. So I'm curious, you mentioned that collaborating with all these people has helped you as a coach. How has being in that type of environment helped you personally with your own physical health and wellness goals and what that looks like?
Oh man, my own health and wellness goals have taken a backseat to everything else that I'm doing.
I feel like that's a common thread for coaches.
Yeah,
it's
man,
like as soon as you get to coaching or owning, it's like your own health and wellness goals go back and everyone else's go forward.
And it's not like I don't train. Like if you follow me on Instagram, like I'll put lifting videos up or me messing around with handstands and doing things of that nature. So it's not like I'm not doing things. I just know that all of my competitive aspirations have kind of gone out the window. There's still things I want to do. Like I'd like to snatch 225. I'm pretty close. I'd like to clean 300. I'm also pretty close. I'd like to do a press handstand, which I'm working on right now. There's all these like skill and like strength markers that I'd like to do, but I don't really, if it comes down to it and I'm going to help my athlete in a session versus I'm going to train, I'm going to help my athlete. That's just the way that it is. And maybe that's a little bit of faulty on my own, and I'm almost like blunting my own training or health and wellness, but that is more of an importance to me than me doing something. And yeah, I think that's just kind of where I'm at right now with it.
Yeah. Have you noticed any difference in your own sort of personal health and wellness in terms of showing up as the best version of you by having some focus on your own habits, the way you sleep, eat, and train that allows you to be better for other people? Or what have you noticed with that?
For sure. I know that if I don't sleep well, I'm a mess. And it's just something that I have to work on. I'm a light sleeper. I think I have a little bit of anxiety because I just have all these thoughts in my head when I go to sleep at night. So I got to do the things that will help me basically downregulate and unwind at the end of the night. Because if I spend too much time watching TV and being on my phone or I don't know, doing other like little silly things before I go to sleep, like it just makes sleeping such an enjoyable experience, and then it messes me up for the next day or maybe 2 days. So I just know that like in order for me to show up for my athletes and the people that I work with in terms of a physio side of things, or even on the education, like if I have to write or I have to like stand in the room with Max and Kyle while they're on camera, I know that like I have to be able to sleep well and make sure that I'm fueled eating wise so that I can actually do the thing. So I've just learned that a little bit of CBD at the end of the night, making sure that my room is black as it can be or dark as it can be, making sure that it's cool. Those are the things that have really helped me. And if I don't have those things, I notice a complete difference. I've also started to realize that because I've been a little bit more consistent with training lately, I've actually been hungrier. And if I don't eat before I go to bed, I'm waking up in the middle of the night. So I've been trying to navigate that a little bit just for myself. So there are definitely things that I have to do in order to make sure that I can, what you said, like be there for my people.
Yeah, it's always fascinating because we always want to see the best for others and the ones that we coach. So we're trying to dial in all the aspects of their sleep and their nutrition and their movement. And when we maybe neglect or it takes a backseat for us, all of a sudden we notice like we're not showing up as well as we could.
Yeah.
And so I think having that balance of am I taking care of myself so I can take care of other people is helpful for us to play the long game versus like those short spurts. And so sleep is a big one, nutrition for you. Anything else that for you are like the non-negotiables of like, I got to get these things in my day. And that really helps me to show up as the best version of myself.
If I do some movement wise, even if it's like sub an hour and I just like I get to do something with someone, that definitely keeps me going. It doesn't have to be as focused as it used to be. Like I used to be very I used to be very anal, and I had to do the A, B, C, D, E as it was written. I had to do the weights that were prescribed. I needed to like warm up and cool down well. And I'm less concerned about that now. I'm just like, if I can get in some good training, whatever that ends up being, sometimes it is my own things. Sometimes I jump in with my athletes. Sometimes I jump in with a coach and I just kind of do whatever they're doing. As long as I get to do a little bit throughout the week, that helps me also be successful. But I know that like if I make sure that my sleep is good and I'm eating well, I'm drinking some water and not just completely just being fueled by caffeine, I'm doing okay. And that normally sets me up for success.
Nice. Can you talk us through that mindset shift of I have to do it a certain way and it has to be perfect to anything is better than nothing? Because I've seen that in a lot of athletes. I know I've experienced it myself. You go through ebbs and flows of life where it's like, hey, I've got my training dialed in. I like doing my local competitions, or like it's exactly the way I want it to be. And then all of a sudden life throws a curveball at you and you're like, well, I can't go in for class or I can't stay on the progression. So what's the point? How did that mindset shift take place, and what allowed you to be okay with, hey, some movement's better than no movement?
It was definitely an identity shift. I think that's the biggest thing that happened. I tried to hold on to, I guess, like my athletic self in the terms of like the CrossFit space. I tried to really hold on to that for as long as I could. And as I was finishing up my degree and I was doing my last clinical and I was doing my thesis and I was starting to work at Training Think Tank and I was starting to coach people and see people, I was being pulled in so many directions, but I was still trying to train like I was still an athlete. And it was like by Wednesday I was buried and I could not function, and I wasn't good for anything. I wasn't good at my clinical. I wasn't good for coaching people. My sleep was all messed up. I was so stressed about getting to the gym in order to do the workout, to shower, to get to my clinical, and then to get back to the gym to see people and make sure that I wrote my programs for the day. So it was a painful realization that took me probably longer than it needed to take because I was trying so desperately to hold on. And I think it was just like recognizing that like my priorities had changed, and it was just being okay with that. And it just took time. It's all it was. It wasn't like there was a switch that was flipped. I just kept trying to do something. And at some point I was like, yeah, this isn't working anymore. Like I can't function the way that I'm functioning. So I had to take a step back, and I had to let some things go, basically, like my athletic self. I just kind of had to let that go while my school finished. And I tried to find my place in Training Think Tank and tried to find how I was going to be helpful to people, or like kind of what my role was. And as soon as those things they've been more established now, and they're better now, which is why like my training is kind of getting more consistent again. But with that consistency, it's like a relaxed consistency. It's like, all right, I'm going to do something today. It's just like not as important that I don't hit my snatch percentages. But if I snatch, it's going to be great no matter what I do.
Yeah, I love the identity shift, the shift in the mindset of how you think about movement and training and how it fits into your life. Was that something that was primarily an individual process of working through that, or was it working with the coaches and having those conversations? How did you arrive sort of at that place?
In terms of like my own like identity shift.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was working with Mike McGoldrick. He was my coach at the time, and I could all of my feedback wasn't, not that it was negative. It was just like I couldn't do it. I just like physically like didn't have the energy to do it. And I could tell that he was adjusting it. And I don't know if he'll ever say this, but it was probably really annoying to him. And I don't know if he'll say it was annoying, but I felt like it was annoying because it was constantly being like the programming was constantly changing, trying to find what would work for me. And it was just like through that process that I realized that like, I was like, this isn't working anymore. Like, it's just not, I need to do something different in order to like to sustain my lifestyle right now, which is okay. So it wasn't like anything that was outwardly said to me, not that I remember at least, but I think it was just like kind of like this gradual experience and gradual thing that kind of came on from my own like awareness, and then small things that people said along the way, but nothing like, hey dude, you gotta stop doing this.
Yeah. That's what I've noticed as a coach too, is you can start to see some of those trends in athletes as they come in. And, there's times where the training is really consistent and they're on it. And then other times where work and other family obligations are getting, in the way, I would say. But having those conversations and letting them know, like, it's okay. Movement is great. If there's a time in your life where it comes back, no worries. But helping people through that process can be really challenging, because when they get into CrossFit and they start loving it and they start seeing progression and they're advancing, then it becomes their identity of like, I'm a CrossFitter. I've got to do it this way. I got to keep getting better. And there's going to come a point in time where either the PRs slow down, the amount you can focus on training slows down, and now you're kind of left with this like, well, what's the point? How do I keep doing this thing that I love, but I'm not experiencing it the same way I did back when? So it's something that I know I'm certainly trying to work on as a coach, of how to have those conversations and guide people in that way.
Yeah, because I just get to work with a bunch of people. I've been working with a friend of mine, kind of like on and off, who is an intern, I guess, for his medical residency or like becoming a doctor. I don't really understand the process, but he's somewhere in that process, and he's kind of like towards the tail end of it, like actually becoming a doctor. And in like the process of him going through med school, like he found CrossFit, and there was times where it was great and it actually helped him and kind of like de-stressed him. And now he does 13-hour shifts 5 days in a row, and he tries to do CrossFit on top of that. And I've had a couple conversations with him about it, and just like your outside the gym life is so stressful that you can't pile on more stress, because all it's doing is just dropping your threshold is already met, and you're trying to put more stress on top of it, and you're just crushing your body in order trying to do something that it doesn't have the capacity to do it like right now. It doesn't mean that you can't do CrossFit. It just like has to look different. It has to be sustainable work. It has to be easier work. Like it has to be strength training that doesn't crush your soul because you're already coming in at such a deficit. So we've had the conversation a bunch of times. I'm sure I'm going to have the conversation with him some more. But I'm just trying to help him find something that makes sense. And I'm sure a lot of other people are in that same boat, where life outside of the gym is like, it's meeting their threshold. And if they kind of try to like throw more intensity on top of it, all they're going to do is set themselves up for potentially getting hurt or burning out or having other, I don't know, hormonal and behavioral issues like poor sleep and diet stress and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think having people get to a point where they understand it's a group environment, but it's an individual journey. And what you do each day can look and be different than the person next to you, and that's okay. And it's really tough, especially when there's scores and people are putting things on the board, or you have personal goals of like, hey, I want to keep getting stronger. I want to keep progressing in these movements. And now all of a sudden it's like, wow, my stress threshold has been hit for today. I need to pull back on the weight, pull back on the workout. Well, now I look at the person next to me and I'm like, I'm not doing nearly what they're doing, so it's not worth it. Those are really hard conversations and individual realizations, I think, for people to have.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard for people to know what the threshold is. They almost kind of have to meet it a couple times and be like, oh, this is where it exists. I can't do this anymore. Because just to tell people about it is, I feel like most individuals' initial reaction is to be guarded or get defensive. And all you're trying to do is be like, hey, man, it doesn't have to be what's written on the board. Like, I made that up. Like, it doesn't matter. Let's do something different. We can make up something else. It doesn't have to be that. But yeah, just a conversation that's going to have to be had a couple times.
Yeah, so building those relationships with your athletes as a coach is paramount to get that trust, that buy-in, educate them, and help guide them and walk them through the process to get to those goals. Essentially, what you highlighted and things that get you really excited.
Yeah, for sure.
So I got one final question for you. One of the questions I love to ask our guests is about their own sort of personal principles, standards, or things that sort of guide and influence the way that they think, the way that they communicate and work with others. Some folks think of it as like their core values. Some folks think of it as like, here's just a saying or a phrase that really guides or influences the way I like to think and work with people. Is there anything that comes to mind for you, whether it's like a standard, a principle, a value that sort of guides and influences how you work with others?
I think the first one is like be of service to people. I think that's like the biggest one. Because I think that's the role of both of my jobs, or even all three of my jobs, like all three branches. Like the whole point is to be of a service to these people and to provide as much knowledge or education or support as I can to make them or help them reach their goals. So I feel like that's kind of the thing that leads me. And if I'm kind of staying true to that, that helps guide the other things that I do. Like the next thing in line would be don't stop learning, because it just helps me continue to reinforce the things that I know or find the things that I don't know. Because I know there are so many things that I don't understand. And I know like the very basic principles of them, but I know that there's so much more depth that I need to like really get into if I want to like understand it well. It just kind of depends on like the topic. So I think those two things, they kind of go hand in hand in order to kind of help people go forward and like reach their goals. And I think the last thing that I would kind of throw in or lump into like my core values is don't be afraid to let things go that no longer serve you. I think we have a hard time. We have a hard time recognizing when it's time to move on from things, and that could be anything in life. It doesn't have to be like CrossFit related. That could just be a life principle. I just personally like did some things in my past that kind of like I regret and I wish I could change, but obviously you can't go backwards in time and you just kind of have to move forward with what you have. So I wish I would have been able to have more awareness around that, like that period of my life, and been able to strip those things away that were no longer serving me, or figure out ways to kind of combat those thought processes and the things that I was doing, so I could move forward in life. But I was so resistant against that. So I think those are like the big things, like be of service to people, don't stop learning, and don't be afraid to let things go if they need to be.
Yeah, I love it. Service, learning, and then that idea of acceptance and moving forward. Nice way to succinctly kind of package up how you've come to understand how you work with others, how you like to interact with others, and how you help guide them and help them on their journeys towards whatever their goals are. So if anyone's interested, I don't know that you have any space for it, but if people want to get in touch with you or contact you, what's the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. It's just my name, Kyle Habdo. And then you can be on the lookout. The TTT education team is going to start to put out some more information on coaching individuals, whether through strength training and conditioning, helping people get out of pain, or strategies around doing that. And then we'll start to like build out a wider branch of just free resources, and hopefully be able to start to educate coaches and like allow them to be a better version of themselves, or provide world-class coaching for their own athletes. And that's our goal. So be on the lookout for that.
Awesome. Well, Kyle, thanks so much for spending some time today. Enjoyed the conversation, getting to pick your brain on how you think about movement and performance and working with athletes. It was great chatting with you. Thanks for all the work you're doing down at Training Think Tank to support affiliates, individuals, and everything in between. So thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on.